The idea for this tutorial was a friend who told me, Kara, show how to trace your own clothes and turn it into a pattern piece. I can totally show you how to make it, and it's super easy. We're doing basics, so we're using essentials that you have at home, like paper, a regular pen, even a fork. You're gonna see here in the tutorial I'm keeping it short, simple, and basic. So I'm just gonna show you how to recreate a t-shirt and a skirt. You can even use these pattern pieces to upcycle an existing clothing that you have in your closet. These are sustainable ways to upcycle and use already what you have to get new clothing into your outfits. I love this because it's just like, it's perfect. It's sustainable, it's fun, it's making, it's doing, and you get all that you want in your values, just how I follow in my style, wearing my values one piece at a time, upcycling them, and keeping a healthy, holistic routine with fashion. Alright, so before getting started, I'm going to show you the materials. I like to use this Papermate pen. It's great for marking. The tracing tool, but I do have a substitute. At the end of the video, I tell you what it is. And then clear tape to attach the papers, and a grid ruler. This is great especially for adding your seam allowance, and then any paper. It can be printing paper or cardboard, and then you can start tracing your shirt. I take my paper and overlay it on top of another sheet. I take my tape and apply and stick them together. By taping both sides in the front and in the back, it makes it nice and sturdy. So I suggest you take your time and make sure to get rid of those bubbles, nicely flatten the sheets down, and you want it to have a nice bendable feeling to it. So that's why I really like this wide tape. That's why I like using this wide clear tape, but if you have the thinner one, that works too. I just find that this size holds the paper better, and then I just continue on adding until I have this large space of white paper. Now that was the first step, taping the paper together, and then you're going to take the shirt and fold it in half. Lay it down on top of the paper and start marking. I suggest that if you have weights, to put weights on top. For me, by having the ruler on top of the areas that I am not touching the shirt, helps it not move. And then I start marking by following the shape of the shirt. You can start marking using the tracing tool. By using the tracing tool, you're making dents, and then you can go back with your pen. You'll see me, but before I do and I go grab the pen, I make these dents in order to create the silhouettes of the shirt in the paper. That makes it easier when I'm go back and trace with my marking tool using my ruler. The nice thing about a cutting mat, if you have one, is that by having a cutting mat, I'm able to follow and create a straight line. So if you want your lines to be nice and even, I suggest that if you can invest in this tool, I suggest that if you can invest in a cutting mat, please do. If you do have, let's say, a Joann's close by, they always have coupons. Use it in a cutting mat, get a big one, and this will make your pattern making so much easier because you're able to create straight lines. And especially when pattern making, you want to have straight lines in order to get the grain line correct. I'm talking about the grain line, and I am marking my armhole. As you can see, I don't have a sleeve ruler, and this is actually good because I'm showing you this tutorial because you're getting the basics. Let's say you're a newbie, you have none of these tools. How can you get through it? You can get through it with simply a ruler, taping your paper together, and creating the silhouettes of your shirt and marking the grain line. And you really want to get the grain line correct because the purpose of it is to help you align the shirt with the pattern so it's nice and straight and even. So it's really nice. And the other thing after I'm done drawing the pattern is that I write cut unfold, because you folded your shirt in half. So if you cut unfold, you are reminding yourself to fold the fabric, draw the pattern on top of it with your chalk or marking tool, and cut it. These arrows, they tend to be common in the drafting of the pattern making. And then afterwards, I like to add a 0.5 seam allowance. I like this seam allowance because it's enough. Normally when you're a beginner, you use 7/8, but if you have experience, you can use even 1/4 seam allowance. I think this is really just an optional choice of the amount of seam allowance you want. If you're a beginner, 7/8 or even 1 inch but not in the collar. In the collar area, you don't want to add that much because then it becomes bulky. For the hem area, I did add 1 inch. And then for the arm, if you can see, there is tape there. I want you to notice this. Notice how it's starting to smudge, but because I just drew it and didn't touch that area, it gave me enough time to draft the pattern, cut it, and still have this even bodice piece of my top. So take your time. This will happen if you're using this method, but it's okay because as long as you don't touch that area, you don't smudge it, you will be able to cut it on time and still have that same clean result that you want your pattern piece to have. Afterwards, I move on to the sleeve. The sleeve, you have to tape enough paper to be able to fold it because it's the same thing. We're going to cut the sleeve in half, and I followed the same method where I laid the sleeve on top, start marking it with my tracing tool to create dent and recreate the shape of the sleeve onto the paper before going in with my pen and ruler to straighten the lines, because especially when you're creating these dents, they're not that even. Some are a little bit crooked and move, but that's why I suggest that if you can get a cutting mat, it makes this process so much easier, clean, and aligns your fabric to your pattern piece so well. Especially, like I said, when you're adding the grain line and making straight perpendicular lines that help you with the width of your fabric. So another thing, there is this groove in the arm. My top didn't have this like groove of normally when you see in sleeves, but depending on your clothing, this might change. Or if you have, let's say, a long sleeve, the back of the sleeve might be different from the front of the sleeve. If you're having troubles and you need help troubleshooting or recreating that pattern, let me know in the comments and I will answer your questions. Likewise, you can also go to Instagram, get more daily updates of what's going on in my sewing journey, and there you can DM me or write in the comments any suggestions or any help that you might need in your pattern making process. Cara Style is here to help you. So we're in this together and we're learning as we go. So even if you have your own tips, let me know. What I did, I have the other half. What I like to do next with the arm sleeve is then write the title, finish off like drawing the line of the seam allowance. By drawing the line of the seam allowance, it just reminds me that it's there. You don't have to, it's not necessary, but if you add it into the other half, it just looks cooler. Once I'm done creating the bodice, we're going to trace out the skirt. This is actually quicker and I'm recreating the same method, so you're going to hear me repeat the same process. With the leftovers of the paper, I'm into sustainability. Wherever I can save and waste less, I find those ways, and I suggest that you do the same with your leftover paper scraps. Tape them together, and then this can be paper that you can use to recreate your skirt pattern, and it's the same method. I fold it in half, trace it with the tracing tool to create those dents of the shape of the skirt, and then I go in with my pen, ruler, and create those straight perpendicular lines needed when you're cutting across the grain. So this is very important, and you want to take your time drafting, especially when you have those curves. The nice thing about this is that I'm showing you a nice, simple, basic skirt that doesn't even need a zipper or buttons. This is a nice pattern that you can use if you have stretchy fabric or any skirt that you want to revamp. And I write in those same things where the grain line is, where I need to cut. If it has to be cut on the fold, I add the seam allowance, and then something else that you can add into your pattern piece to remind you of the connecting the front and the back is that you can add notches. Those notches are just reminders for you to like connect the front and the back and the front together. Likewise, you can write in the pattern piece, cut 2, because then it'll tell you, okay, you have to cut 2 pieces out of this pattern, or if you have to cut 4, it tells you. This is a nice thing when you're pattern making, you want to write in the pattern all the different steps that you have to do, like cutting on fold or how many you have to cut, because these are indications, and these are indications that save you time in the process of sewing. You can just read your pattern, follow how much you have to cut, how many, where to connect the front and the back, and you save yourself time. And that's pretty much it. See how simple it looks? It's simple. It's the basics of pattern making, and this is pretty much what you need to know to get started. And the sewing hack that I want to tell you is use a fork. So if you have a thrifted fork like I do, that I really don't use for eating yet, and if you do use a fork for eating, just wash it. You can use the fork to create those dents that the tracing tool does by pressing down. You might need to press a little bit harder just to create those dents, but it works. You get the same results. It's a little bit slower, but if you don't have a tracing tool, this is a nice way to use a tool that you have at home already. If you love chatty videos and also learn at the same time, Kara's Style is your channel to follow and to learn, and also just join a community where we just love sharing and talking and getting to know each other's stories behind each clothing that we have. So make sure to subscribe to my channel, come back, like the video, comment, and join our Star Squad as we shine in upcycling one piece at a time. So keep on shining.